If you've been a regular subscriber to our channel, you've probably heard me talk over and over again about how I recommend the M4 over all of the other brands and types of airsoft guns that are out there. That's pretty much because these are the most popular guns that are out there that we sell, so obviously we're going to have more parts and accessories that are available for these particular guns. In today's segment, we're going to talk about something that I think illustrates that, which is magazines for airsoft guns. First of all, if you're planning on getting a new magazine for your airsoft gun, it's important to make sure that you get exactly the right magazine for your particular gun, because not all of them are exactly the same. I know there's a lot of websites you can go on to buy these kind of things online, but the problem is you can't actually see the magazine until it comes in, and half the time it may not be exactly what you thought it is. So it's important to actually stop into a store like this so you can actually try the magazine out for yourself and make sure it works properly. It's important to note that some airsoft guns, even though they may be the same model, may not use the same exact magazines as each other. For instance, this is a G36, so you're going to assume, well, all G36s use the same magazine, right? Wrong. This is the Double Eagle G36, which uses the opaque magazine, which is a mid-cap magazine, and looks something like that on the end of it, versus the Umerix version, which has the slightly raised portion on the top of the magazine, which is somewhat different from the Double Eagle, versus the ones that JG, Ares, and KWA use, which is a third style of magazine. So you can see these are all somewhat different from each other and obviously are not interchangeable. Also on G36s, there are some kits that you can get to convert them over to use standard M4 magazines. So it's important to actually bring your gun and the magazine with you to the store so that we can match it up and get you exactly the right magazine for your gun. Now, these variations in magazine designs are pretty much prevalent in the cheaper plastic gearbox guns that are out there, which tend to use a proprietary design which is only usable in one kind of gun. Versus if you're buying the higher quality full metal gearbox guns, you're going to have a higher likelihood that the magazine design is somewhat more standardized, so you'll have better interchangeability between brands from one brand to the next if you're getting a higher end gun. Now, if you've ever bought an airsoft gun that came with a higher end full metal gearbox, the odds are it came with a high capacity magazine as standard issue. Now, these are made to resemble the actual magazines that go into the guns, like the AK-47 and the M4, and although they may differ aesthetically from one another, they all have pretty much the same parts, which are the hopper, where you just basically dump the BBs down into the magazine and they hold them in there in the reservoir, some sort of winding device which allows you to wind the BBs up into the magazine, and then some sort of release or catch which allows the BBs to be released up into the gun. To load a high capacity magazine, you just basically open the door on the hopper and dump the BBs down into it and fill it up. Now, it's important that you actually fill the thing up. I've had a few people that have bought magazines and taken them back and said these magazines don't work, and you look down in it and there's only a few BBs in the thing, so there's not enough BBs for it to actually draw them up and load them into the magazine. So fill the thing all the way up, number one. You have a winder on the bottom which allows you to wind it up, and you basically just keep winding it until you see the BBs appear at the top of the magazine, and you know it's ready to go ahead and be loaded. So you can then insert the magazine into the gun, give it about another maybe 10 or so winds. Don't overwind the magazine because that will wreck the spring, and then go ahead and start shooting. When you run out of BBs, you just wind more BBs up into the gun again, and you don't have to keep pulling the magazine out. The other option with the winder is there are some guns that have the little hole in the magazine and a little winding key which fits into it, which basically allows you to wind up the gun externally like this rather than having to use the internal winder, which is a great option if you have big fat fingers or if you're wearing gloves and you can't reach the little dial. This gives you another way of winding up the magazine. Now, there may be different size magazines that are available for your gun depending on which model you have. If you're using one of the more popular guns like the M4, there may be a lot more choices for you as far as the magazine sizes that are available for you, versus the more exotic guns that are out there may only have one standard size magazine and that's it. You can see for the M4 here, these are all high capacity magazines. We have the 200, the 250, and the 300 round magazines. All are the same exact size and will fit into the same gun with no kind of modification. Now, one of the biggest complaints I hear about the high capacity magazines is that they're noisy when you're trying to run with these things, so it's awfully hard to sneak up on somebody when you're in a tactical situation. The other complaint is that they're somewhat unrealistic in that they hold about 350 rounds and you reload them by turning a little winder on the bottom, versus an actual magazine that only holds about 30 rounds and you actually have to change magazines when you're out of bullets. So if you're looking for something that's a little more realistic, you may want to look into getting the mid-cap magazine design. Mid-cap magazines give you a little more realistic edge to your airsoft shooting. They come in standard capacities like 30, 60, 90, and 120 round magazines, and you can also get them in the smaller sizes. So if you live in a state like Maryland, which restricts your actual firearm capacity to 10 rounds, you can buy airsoft magazines, which are the same capacity as your actual firearm, so you can train at a lower cost with the same size equipment that you use in your actual firearm. Now, these smaller size airsoft magazines are pretty much limited to the M4. Good luck finding something like this for an AK-47 or a G36. They just don't make them, which is pretty much why I recommend the M4 over all other airsoft guns that are out there. To load a mid-cap, you just basically load up your speed loader, which you just dump the BBs into the hopper, and then you inject them into the magazine until the magazine is fully loaded. And you can go ahead and load up all of your mid-cap magazines and put them into your vest and go ahead and do it that way. The nice thing about the mid-caps is that even though this is fully loaded, it's almost dead silent when you're running with it, versus the high-capacity magazine, which sounds like a baby rattle when you're running around with it. So if you're going to do the mid-cap magazines, it's probably a good idea to go out and get a couple of magazines. That way you can load them up in advance, and you don't have to run around with your speed loader making noise, and you can be totally silent when you're on the airsoft field. Another style magazine that's been hugely popular lately is the flash style magazines for airsoft. These are high capacity magazines just like the other ones that we showed you earlier. So they have the hoppers, you basically open up the little door, dump your BBs down into it. But rather than winding it with a wheel on the bottom, obviously there's no wheel on this magazine, you open the little door on the bottom and it gives you access to a pull cord, and you basically pull that 3 or 4 times and that loads the BBs up into the magazine and you're ready to go. Now it's a little noisy and yeah, it rattles like the other magazines, but it gives you a much faster loading option than you get with the standard high capacity magazine. One of the biggest problems I see with people with their magazines is that they don't maintain them properly and they usually die prematurely on them. You got to figure you're going to spend about 20 or 30 bucks on one of these things, so you want it to last as long as possible. What I recommend is using some of the high viscosity silicone oil. We sell the Firepower brand here. What I recommend is just shoot a little bit down the throat of the magazine, as well as shooting a little bit into the hopper to keep it lubricated. You don't want the thing to be dripping with oil, but you want enough oil in there to keep it lubricated so the BBs can move freely up into the gun and feed properly. The other problem I see with people is that they'll leave all of the BBs in the magazine with it wound up all the way so that there's tension on the spring, and then they'll put it away for a long time, which will basically wreck the spring. So what I recommend is when you're done shooting your gun, there's a little switch at the top of it that releases the tension on it. You basically pull that, that'll release all the BBs and release the tension on the spring, and your magazine will last a lot longer because of it. So I think I made my point. With all the different size magazines that are available for the M4, why would you want to limit yourself to just one size magazine for any other airsoft gun? You know, you want to be an individual, buy an M4 and just paint it a funny color or camouflage it or put a lot of accessories on it or something like that. Or if you want the other guns, feel free to stop in. I'll be more than glad to sell them to you too. I'll just try to push an M4 on you first. So if you have any other questions about magazines, guns, or any of this other stuff, feel free to stop by the showroom. I'll be glad to sit down with you and get you exactly what you want the first time. So like us on Facebook, and we'll see you the next time.